What happened to Trayvon Martin? Let's dive deeper into this case. Not just any case, but one that would spark the attention from millions worldwide.
The growing outrage over the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. The nation's attention is focused on Sanford, Florida, north of Orlando, where Martin died almost 1 month ago. But it is still making headlines across the country, as we see in this morning's New York Post. President Obama has made his own concerns very clear in very personal terms, underscoring the national interest in
arrest George Zimmerman for the killing of Trayvon Martin in cold blood today.
In the 3 weeks since Trayvon Martin was killed inside this gated Florida community, Neighborhood Watch volunteer George Zimmerman has maintained he shot Martin in self-defense. Benjamin Crump, who represents Martin's family, says the unarmed teenager was targeted because of his race.
Trayvon Martin was just a 17-year-old boy from the neighborhood carrying a bag of Skittles and Arizona iced tea when he was gunned down by 28-year-old Neighborhood Watch George Zimmerman, February 26, 2012 in the state of Florida. The streets were quiet as if the entire city was holding its last breath. There was a feeling that something was about to happen. Something dark, and something that could never be taken back. Something unforgettable. As the street lights flickered like shooting stars of essential caution and apprehension, the tension in the air aimed in every direction ready to meet its mark. It had all began as your typical evening when the tragedy struck, ending with blood spilling onto the pavement. No one saw it coming. It was more than just someone dying. It was a murder that would gain major public responses nationwide. Because Trayvon maintained a close relationship with his father, he would visit him and his fiancée frequently, so this night was no different when he headed in the direction of the gated community better known as the Retreat at Twin Lakes. However, a Neighborhood Watch volunteer was patrolling the area in his car when he spotted the teen walking after he had gone to the store to purchase snacks. Shortly after the encounter, 911 received a call about a suspicious person. George had insisted that Trayvon looked like he was up to no good and went on to explain his behavior to be extremely suspicious. He then took it up a notch, allegedly that the teen may be under some kind of controlled substance.
This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. He's an they always get away.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
After his report, the dispatchers told George not to follow the person in question, but he went against their wishes anyway, deciding to take matters into his own hands. He followed him, eventually provoking a physical altercation between the two. As the fight escalated, George drew his gun, and he shot Trayvon. However, self-defense was his claims when the authorities arrived, yet it was later confirmed that the victim was only carrying a bag of Skittles and Arizona iced tea with no weapons at the time of his murder.
So he's talking to police officials, he's explaining what happened from his perspective. Now keep in mind, this is just one side of the story.
Florida's Stand Your Ground law allows the use of deadly force if a person reasonably believes that it is necessary to prevent death or great bodily harm. Because of this, George was not arrested at the scene, which only ignited a flame that would seem nearly impossible to put out easily.
You are. Okay. And I said, no, I don't have a problem. And I went to go grab my cell phone, but I left it in a different pocket, and I looked down in my pant pocket, and he said, you got a problem now. And then he was here, and he punched me in the face. I stumbled, and I fell down, he pushed me down, somehow he got on top of me. He got on top of me somewhere around here, and that's when I started screaming for help. I started screaming, help, help, as loud as I could. I felt like my body was on the grass and my head was on the cement, and he just kept slamming and slamming. And I kept yelling, help, 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 as loud as I could. He put his hand on his nose, on my nose, and his other hand on my mouth. He said,
there was public outrage in which led to ongoing rallies and protests, aggressively bringing racial profiling to the forefront. The Million Hoodie March was a symbolic representation where the participants intentionally wore hoodies while making their bold statement with each step towards justice.
Hundreds of demonstrators marched in downtown New York City in support of Trayvon Martin, an unarmed 17-year-old teenager gunned down in Florida. And they are angry.
Our government is trash.
I feel explosive.
I feel betrayed by my country.
Still, despite anger, Trayvon's mother's message was clear.
Zimmerman sustained injuries, but when we looked at the video, it was obvious that there were no visible injuries. There were no blood on his shirt. So we have concluded just by watching this video that there may not have been any injuries at all.
Trayvon's mother Sabrina Fulton launched a foundation called the Trayvon Martin Foundation, a non-profit organization established to combat gun violence, promote social justice and support families affected by similar tragedies. Its mission is to raise awareness about violent crime, providing support for victims' families, and empowering the youth through educational programs focused on conflict resolution, safety, and community building, but she didn't stop there. Sabrina hired a prominent civil rights attorney, Benjamin Crump, to help her win the fight against Zimmerman.
I'm Sabrina Fulton. This will be my first Mother's Day without my son Trayvon. I know it will be hard, but my faith, family, and friends will pull me through. On Sunday, I'm going to say a prayer for other mothers across America who share this unbearable pain. Just like me, 30,000 mothers lost their children this year to senseless gun violence. Nobody can bring our children back, but it would bring us comfort if we can help spare other mothers the pain that we will feel on Mother's Day and every day for the rest of our lives. I'm asking you to join Florida by calling upon the governor of your state to re-examine similar stand your ground laws throughout the nation to keep our families safe. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Happy Mother's Day.
On April 11, 2012, Trayvon's family cried tears of joy when authorities arrested George for second-degree murder and manslaughter.
Again, behind the houses in a dark area, I heard him say, "You got a problem?" And I turned around and I saw him, and I went to go for my phone and call 911 instead of non-emergency this time. But I guess I didn't have my phone in the pocket that I thought I had it in. I had it in my jacket pocket, and I reached for my pocket, and I was looking for my phone, and he just punched me in the nose. And I fell backwards to the side. Somehow I ended up on my back. He ended up on top of me, and he just kept punching my face and my head, and I was screaming for help. And he told me, "Shut the fuck up." And I kept yelling for help. And I got a little bit of leverage, and I started to sit up, and then he took my head and slammed it into the concrete several times, and each time I felt like my head was going to explode more than the last. I felt like I was going to lose consciousness, and I started screaming for help, and he covered my nose with one hand and my mouth with the other one, and he told me, "Shut the fuck up," and I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating, and all I could think about was I didn't want him to keep slamming my head on the concrete, so I kind of shifted and squirmed my way out, not out from under him, but like to where, because the concrete was it was a sidewalk, and it felt like he only had my head on maybe a quarter of the concrete, and I could shift my way out and get onto the grass, where if he was slamming my head, it would just hit the grass and not the concrete. But when I shifted, my jacket came up and my shirt came up and exposed my firearm. And that's when he sat up and looked and said, "You're gonna die tonight, motherfucker." And I felt him take one hand off my mouth and slide it down my chest. And I just pinched his arm, and I grabbed my gun and I aimed it at him and fired one shot. He kind of sat back and said, "You got me," or you got me, you got it, something like that. And I thought he was saying that he heard the shot and that he was giving up. So I pushed him off me, and I don't remember if I pushed him off me or I pushed him back. Either way, I ended up on top of him, straddling him. He was up face down. And when he was hitting me in the face and the head, I felt like he was hitting me with something in his hands. So I thought he had a weapon, and I grabbed his hands and pushed them away from his body. And I said, stop. I said, stop, just don't move. Mm-hmm. And he was saying something like, and cursing. I said, stop, don't move. And then somebody came, and they had a flashlight, and I thought it was a cop. And I said, I still had my gun in my hand as I was holding his hand out. And I said, are you a cop? And he said, no. And he said, I'll call them. And I said, I don't need you to call them. I already called them. They're on their way. I need you to help me restrain this guy. And he said, I'm calling the police. I'm already on the phone with them. And I got up off of him because he stopped struggling. And I thought he just, stopped struggling. And then I holstered my weapon. I saw another flashlight. And I said, are you the police? Because I had blood all over my face and my eyes. Mm-hmm. And the flashlight, it was dark where I was. So the flashlight was really bright. And I said, are you the police? And he said, who shot him? And I said, I did. And I put my hands above my head like that. And I don't remember if he told me to turn my back to him and walk back towards him. But I turned my back to him, and I said, I did. And I raised my jacket, and I said, my gun's right there. I think I told him a few times, my gun's right there. It's right there. And he said, I know where it is. Just keep your hands on your head. Don't move. I said, can you just take my gun? And he said, I'm taking care of it. Just don't move. So I stopped. He handcuffed me. He took my hands down and handcuffed me. Oh, that's when he brought my hands down. I said, my gun's right there on my right side, because I didn't want him to think that.
He decided to take his case to trial, prolonging justice as the keys of anticipation played a repetitive melody. But it was just the kind of peace that the community needed after Trayvon's celebration of life, March 3, 2012 in Miami, Florida. He was laid to rest in Miami-Dade Memorial Park. However, his legacy still lives on forever. Moreover, his murals can be found in various locations across the United States, including Tampa, Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, Oakland, California, Detroit, Michigan, and New York. The case was so controversial that it gained attention from the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
The President of the United States has just gone into the White House press briefing room. Let's listen.
I want to come out here, first of all, to tell you that Jay is prepared for all your questions and is very much looking forward to the session. Second thing is, I want to let you know that over the next couple of weeks, there are going to obviously be a whole range of issues, immigration, economics, et cetera. We'll try to arrange a fuller press conference to address your questions. The reason I actually wanted to come out today is not to take questions, but to speak to an issue that obviously has gotten a lot of attention over the course of the last week, the issue of the Trayvon Martin ruling. I gave a preliminary statement right after the ruling on Sunday, but watching the debate over the course of the last week, I thought it might be useful for me to expand on my thoughts a little bit. First of all, I want to make sure that once again I send my thoughts and prayers, as well as Michelle's, to the family of Trayvon Martin, and to remark on the incredible grace and dignity with which they've dealt with the entire situation. I can only imagine what they're going through, and it's remarkable how they've handled it. The second thing I want to say is to reiterate what I said on Sunday, which is there are going to be a lot of arguments about the legal issues in the case. I'll let all the legal analysts and talking heads address those issues. The judge conducted the trial in a professional manner. The prosecution and the defense made their arguments. The juries were properly instructed that in a case such as this, reasonable doubt was relevant, and they rendered a verdict. And once the jury's spoken, that's how our system works. But I did want to just talk a little bit about context and how people have responded to it and how people are feeling. You know, when Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago. And when you think about why, in the African American community at least, there's a lot of pain around what happened here, I think it's important to recognize that the African American community is looking at this issue through a set of experiences and a history that that doesn't go away. There are very few African American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very, very few African American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator. There are very few African Americans who haven't had the experience of getting on an elevator and a woman clutching her purse nervously and holding her breath until she had a chance to get off. That happens often. And you know, I don't want to exaggerate this, but those sets of experiences inform how the African American community interprets what happened one night in Florida. And it's inescapable for people to bring those experiences to bear. The African American community is also knowledgeable that there is a history of racial disparities in the application of our criminal laws. Everything from the death penalty to enforcement of our drug laws. And that ends up having an impact in terms of how people interpret the case. Now, this isn't to say that the African American community is naive about the fact that African American young men are disproportionately involved in the criminal justice system, that they're disproportionately both victims and perpetrators of violence. Although black folks do interpret the reasons for that in a historical context, they understand that some of the violence that takes place in poor black neighborhoods around the country is born out of a very violent past in this country. And that the poverty and dysfunction that we see in those communities can be traced to a very difficult history. And so the fact that sometimes that's unacknowledged adds to the frustration. And the fact that a lot of African American boys are painted with a broad brush, and the excuse is given, well, there are these statistics out there that show that African American boys are more violent. Using that as an excuse to then see sons treated differently causes pain. I think the African American community is also not naive in understanding that statistically, somebody like Trayvon Martin was probably statistically more likely to be shot by a peer than he was by somebody else. So folks understand the challenges that exist for African American boys. But they get frustrated, I think, if they feel that there's no context for it, and that context is being denied.
This was a tragedy that pulled on the heartstrings of millions as they all tuned in to see his powerful speech about Trayvon Martin and racism. Now looking out of George Zimmerman lenses, defense attorney Mark O'Mara was hired to represent him throughout his trial following his arrest, sparking opposing views in which his supporters argued that his actions were, in fact, justified. The trial began June 24, 2013, and it only lasted about a month before the jury came to an agreement about George's ultimate fate. The courtroom was filled with heavy emotion along with loud cries as if it were a funeral. Not only Trayvon's family, but the supporters of George sat in disbelief after the verdict caused both tears of joy and pain to sink the courtroom like the crushing of the Titanic.
Fold the verdict form and hand it to Deputy Jarvis. Okay, if you'll please publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 18th Judicial Circuit in and for Seminole County, Florida, State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict: we the jury find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all four-person.
Does either side want to poll the jury?
We would, Your Honor.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. As your juror number is being called, please answer whether this is your verdict.
Juror B 29, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror B 76, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror B 37, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror B 51, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror E 6, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror E 40, is this your verdict? Yes. Thank you.
Ladies, I wish to thank you for your time and consideration of this case.
July 13, 2013, he was acquitted on all charges. Still to this day, some people wonder how he could walk scot-free. As for others, justice was served. What are your thoughts? If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.